Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brumitt and Professor Beane as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the TriStar Podcast. Mr. Brumitt here with Mr. Beane, and we have, this sounds like hyperbole, but we have a very special podcast today. We've got Allison Chandler. She's a mother at the studio. I don't even know how long you've been there, Allison, but you've got 10 kids, 9 have been in the program, a couple are still in the program. One of them has actually worked as a martial arts instructor of ours before she, really went off and got into college and all those things. So I am grateful and extraordinarily excited to have you on the podcast and I kind of introduced you, but Mr. Beane, anything you want to add before she maybe adds any other thing about her credentials and those type of things?
I think that she's going to have a really valuable input, because parents go through the program, they have 1 or 2 kids through the program, and they know each of their kids is different. They're at different levels, and we interact with them at a different level, or at least we try to. But having 10 kids having gone through the program, that is a big catalog, a lot of time spent at the studio. And Allison has watched a great number of classes, and not just at the advanced level or the black belt level, but all the way through the program, because her kids start at a young age and then go through the program. So I think this again will be a very valuable resource for the parents.
And I want everybody to understand too, she's a homeschool parent. You're a former teacher as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious, how did you first hear about TriStar before we kind of grill you, if you will, on some of these other questions?
Sure. Birthday party. One of my sons was invited to a birthday party, and after the party, thought birthday party had come and gone, and within a few days had received a phone call from the office, and said, "Here, you've got this opportunity for a free trial." And she was talking about it, and I said, "Sure, why not? Let's try it." And he loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so that was the initial spark there.
Great. So birthday parties do work.
They do. They do.
Well, excellent. So Mr. Beane, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So when you first walked into TriStar, what were you hoping to accomplish? What were you hoping the martial arts would do with your kids?
Well, honestly, I didn't know a whole lot about martial arts. First walking into the studio, kind of had an idea that it was more than just physical. Had a more than just a physical component to it. And so that was kind of my initial draw. Like, that was what I was thinking. Well, this is kind of probably a little bit bigger than playing softball or playing basketball or something like that. There is so much more than just the physical, push-ups and, all the moves and all of that. There's so much more to it. The character development was just right from the start. That was kind of a draw.
And you had not realized that was such an intricate part of our program, I'm sure, in the beginning. Oh, sure.
Yeah. Exactly. Like with TriStar Martial Arts, you think you're getting your kid into, just, kicks and chops and all the things. And then pretty quickly you realize that, we're praying before class. We're having kind of meetings together at the end of the class to kind of, talk about things that, in, growing and developing yourself as a person, for sure, much more than just karate.
So with that, doing the trial, was that the thing, because it wasn't just kicks and chops like you had said? Was that why you went ahead and started the initial enrollment with, the few of the kids to begin with?
Absolutely. Yep. They saw their brother doing it. And I actually had some that were younger at the time, thought we would just start off with 1 or 2. So one of my sons was invited to the birthday party, and I thought, okay, well, his brother would probably like to go with him. So started off with 2, and then within a few weeks, I had younger kids that were asking me if they could go. And my oldest daughter was asking me if she could go. And so it just kind of, trickled down from there. Everybody was kind of excited about it because it was new. And that's how it kind of snowballed.
And really, at one point, you guys were almost like, a total martial arts family,
For sure.
if you will.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. My husband was there for a while.
Yeah, and I want to bring this out too, because I think this is important. We have always structured our program in a way that we want to make it affordable for families. And so, I'm not going to get into your financial status, but with as many children as you have, if you were to pay full price for each child, I don't know that you would have gotten or had all the kids in it. But because we only charge for the first two and anybody else in the program can train at no additional cost. I mean, obviously excluding the uniforms and those type of things, but I'm talking about the regular, monthly tuition. Was that a factor on, allowing you to get more of the kids in?
For sure. At the very beginning, having a big family, even at that time, that was one of the draws. They could all go to class together or within the same time frame. We were able to do it and, twice a week. And definitely the financial aspect of that for a big family was a huge, huge benefit.
And if you can think back to those early days, what were some of the benefits, some of the things that the kids were starting to do at home that perhaps could be attributed to what was happening in the classes?
So I have 10 kids and each one of them has a completely different personality. My firstborn, typical firstborn. So some of the things that I saw with the karate aspect of it being added to her life was that I felt like it empowered her to use her gifts as a very strong-willed person, but in a positive way. So those things came out at home. They came out in her schoolwork, just in how she approached what her own personal goals were and how she was going to accomplish her goals. And then with some of the boys, the older boys especially, having seen them grow through the entire program, one's an adult now, just the self-confidence that he gained from it, the ability to share his opinion, but in a respectful way, talk to people in authority respectfully, having his own self-respect, and knowing that he was, I don't know, worthy or, worthwhile or just was, how should I say this? Just, people could listen to him and he had a perspective to give and he had a valuable point of view to share.
And teaching your kids, and, Mr. Beane can attest to this as well, is that they're all different. They're all yours, but they're all different. And we approach them differently. I'm sure that you see that, right?
Oh, for sure. I can remember one point in time, this is years ago, a couple of the younger kids were just struggling to get on the mat. They were little. It was scary. They didn't want to get on the mat. It's kind of like they wanted to go so badly, but the moment they stepped toward the mat, it was, all done. They just did not have the courage to get onto the mat. And there were countless times where instructors would come up to them and kind of meet them where they were. I remember one time my son Abbott, he just completely laid himself out on the floor of the mat. He just was out on the mat. And Master Ken at the time, he got down on the floor and he was just like talking to him and, just both of them there, just having a little chat session, laying flat on the mat while class is going on. And definitely each kid has been met kind of where they were at the moment and encouraged to grow.
Well, and as a parent,
go ahead, Mr. Beane, sorry.
Yeah. So as a parent, how did you feel seeing that kind of play out on the mat or close to the mat?
Yeah, it's important for me as a parent to know that my kids are thought of, loved, welcome, important. That was a plus.
I was going to ask too. I remember a specific, I don't want to say run in with you.
Yes.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So can you elaborate on what I just brought up?
Oh, for sure. Okay. So this was early, and this was early in our days at the studio. But there was this one day where I just felt like my kid was getting, beat up on a little too much during sparring. Yeah. And I let you know it. And your words to me were along the lines of, just kind of let them go through it, let them test it, let them try, it's important. And so I sat back and I did. And you were right. You were so right. I kind of like make the analogy of those moments on the mat with like the bigger picture of life. And there are going to be those things where, they outside of the studio, outside, when they're older in their 30s or whatever, where they're going to have these conflicts that come up or these situations that come up that are like sparring, in real life. And just being able to know for themselves that, one, they can get through it, two, that, if they win or if they lose, they can gain something from it. Failure's not a bad word, and all of those things started to build and play out. And yes, you changed my mind on that. And actually those things kind of changed how I parent now. Going forward, my 3-year-old now, she's got a totally different mom than my oldest did, when, 17 years ago when she was 3. So growth for me as well as a parent, seeing these things.
Yeah, I remember that because I don't remember the exact phrase I said, but I said something on the lines because he was getting hit in the face, and I said something on, well, you know how to handle that, don't you? And he just kind of looks at me. I go, block.
Yeah.
and you were like, yes, but you were like, oh my gosh, like, and you even said that to me, like years later, you told me that part. You're like, I was so angry that you just told him to block.
Yeah.
And in that conversation, I want the listeners to understand, in that conversation, when you brought this situation up, you were very respectful when you brought it up. You weren't, you were Mama Bear, and I understood that, but you allowed us to navigate that conversation and then those situations very beautifully. And now we have a story to tell because it's kind of fun to look back at that.
Sure. Oh, it absolutely is fun to look back at that. Yeah. Yeah. But that's true. They, as a parent, I trust you with my kids, and that made for that relationship to be able to go to you and, talk to you about those things even early on. That's important.
Well, what I think is really interesting about that is you were able to see perhaps the teaching elements that were there, parse them out and be able to use them for yourself at home. Like you said, now your youngest has a different mom than what the oldest has, because you were able to learn, again, those concepts, those takeaways that we're using as concepts, and apply those to to your kids as we apply them to the students. I think that's really an interesting takeaway for me.
Yeah. Yo, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. The lessons that I have learned through watching my kids go through karate, as well as, being their chauffeur to karate, and all of those different, time management, if you don't arrive on time for your belt test, you don't test, well, that relies on, or that, depends on me as a mom, because my 7-year-old's not driving himself to class, so, all of those things kind of go together. It's growth for everybody if you allow it.
And I think the allow it part is, while you're there at the school, you have to be able to put the phone down so you can watch what's going on in the kids' class and not zone out and scroll the whole time. For sure.
All right, Mr. Beane, are you calling out parents that
Yes.
have their face in their phone?
Yes, here I am.
Good.
I'm calling them out. Put the phone down, watch the kids, pay attention.
Too. Yeah, often it's a time that I'll see that and I'll say, hey, parents, what do you think about this? And then they're like, oh, man, I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, calling me out too, because I get into that as well. Yeah.
With some of I'm curious, like what we've done in the studio and what's happening there. you said has carried over. Now, I mean, like we said in the beginning, you homeschool your kids.
Mhm.
I'm curious, has martial arts affected or spilled over into the homeschool realm as well for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some of it, for sure. For some of them, for sure, it has. I mentioned my firstborn earlier. I feel like just some of those things she saw, she wanted to eventually become, she went through the kind of the higher programs and she eventually started working for you. She wanted that for herself. And so to be able to achieve those things, she learned that you have to be ready. I mean, you have to be ready. You have to be on, ready to go at all times, prepared. And so she was able to take that concept into her life, and like that kind of just flowed and spilled out onto every aspect of her life. She doesn't miss an opportunity that comes her way, because she's always ready when things come down the lines, opportunities that she's offered and things like that, because she's taken care of other things, ahead of time. She hasn't postponed things. She hasn't delayed anything. She's ready to go. She's got stance going in life. She's ready, right there, ready to go. But for some others, I will say that I do have kids that they're learning the hard way that if you're not prepared, if you're not ready to go, you don't get those opportunities, and so that's been kind of cool to kind of put those things together and look at them.
Well, and kudos to you for allowing that to happen, because there are parents that don't allow that to happen. They try to pick up the pieces for their kids, thinking that they're doing them a service when they're really doing them a disservice
Mm-hmm.
by not allowing them to feel the pain that is appropriate pain,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Years ago, I had to learn that I cannot carry personally the responsibility of every decision that my child makes, because it's just too much. It's absolutely too much. I had a friend come to me the other day and mention something about my son's driving. He's 18 years old. He is an adult. You know what I mean? I said, I'll talk to him about it, but I was not taking that as, a personal attack, because I don't have the bandwidth to be able to carry all of these, aspects of my children. And I brought it to him and I said, hey, this is yours. And he took it on. He went and he addressed it with the other person as best he could. And I think those are skills for parents, just letting, not taking every little thing your kid does as a personal reflection of you, because they're going to do things that you don't necessarily want them to do or you don't agree with. And they're individual humans, just shorter, so just not taking those things personally was one thing that I had to do early on.
Well, I think oftentimes parents try to live through their kids. And I think that's kind of key insight for this is the dad played football, so they want the kid to play football. But you have to understand that, like you said, they're humans, they're people, they're just little people, and they have to at some point be able to make the choices for their own to say, yes, I want this, no, I don't want this, or whatever that area is for them. But if you are continually to make those choices for them and they not at least hear their voice, then when they become older, when they become adults or even older teenagers, they're not going to be able to use or flex that skill because they haven't built it up. So be able to allow the kids to have that voice and to be at least at the very least be heard. Listen, hey, you don't want to go to school. I'm sorry, you have to go to school. This is why. I hear you, but you still have to do that. Some of the things are non-negotiable. I get that, but allow them to flex that skill so that when they become older, when they become adults, they can be full-fledged adults and know how to handle themselves, where a lot of adults are not able to do that. And future adults, I suspect, will be less and less capable of doing that because of how parenting is happening nowadays. Yeah.
One thing that I've kind of been proud of personally for myself. So I've got two in college. They come back for breaks. And I remember as a college student coming back and not knowing where my place was in the family when I came back. For the semester, I'd been an independent adult, so to speak. And now I'm coming back under mom and dad's roof. So one thing that I've kind of, had my kids understand is that once they're 18, they're off to college, they're off doing their own thing, they come back. We're at common courtesy stage. That's what I call it. We're at common courtesy stage. I have for 18 years told them what I think and what I believe and how I expect them to ask, and, the lessons they've learned from their activities and things like that. Now they don't have to come to me to say, hey, can I go do this for, winter break, or, go on this trip or whatever. I want them to keep coming back to me and talking to me about those things. So I just say, hey, we're at common courtesy stage. If you're not going to be, home for an evening, or you're going to be out late or something, just give me the common courtesy of letting me know what's going on. And that seemed to work pretty well lately, because they don't have to worry about like what role now they play in the family. We see them as adults. My husband and I have wanted to grow them into independent people. And, now here we are. My son had a friend question him. He was telling me about some of the things he wants to do, and they're big and kind of wild things. And I'm just, listening with a mom smile on my face, like, and he shared these things. And then his friend asked him, well, aren't you going to ask her permission? And I looked at him, and he said, well, we're at common courtesy stage, And I'm like, I said, you know what? We're right. You're right. You've had 18 years, what I think, and that's kind of where I leave it. And my voice does enter their heads at times when they're making decisions, not always as often as I would like it to, but it does. It does.
Well, and Mr. Brumitt, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. It sounds like what you've done throughout your kids' life is you treated them as kids when they were kids. You parented them. You weren't a friend to them. You didn't try to befriend the kid. But then as they become older, you can treat them like adults. And then eventually maybe you can see it almost as a peer or sort of on the same playing level. But if you do that too early, I think then the connection gets off, and then they see you as a peer early on. And then when you try to reprimand them or correct them or have a stern suggestion to them, it doesn't go as well, because they're on the same playing field as you. But if you do that the correct way, which is, again, sounds like you're doing beautifully, then as they age, then they grow up into adults, and they can be treated like adults, and they kind of almost expect that, especially, as they see their siblings do that, they're going to have that expectation by the time they get to whatever age, then they're at that common courtesy level. Then they kind of know what that's like. Then that's a hoop that they can try to jump to or level up to get to, because that's something that they're going to want, because they want that freedom. I'm assuming that goes with that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I have been through, I think I'm on my fifth, I don't know, somewhere in there, 13-year-old, and 13 seems to be that kind of that age where it's they're very opinionated. They're very moody. They're, it's all over the place. And I'm kind of tired of going through that stage. But one thing that I have, I have been able to see is, because we've gone, through the whole spectrum, I've got a 20-year-old, got an 18-year-old, is that they do grow out of that. And if you can hold kind of your ground and continue to, respect both ways to, kid and parent, that they eventually kind of go through those growing pains and can hopefully become, adults.
I'm curious, and maybe this isn't the right time to ask, but I'm going to ask anyways. Knowing what you know now about the program, that, it's not just kicking and punching, or in your terms, not just kicking and chops. Would you do it all over again?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you're still doing it, but I know.
And even start them earlier. If I had known what I know now about the program when the first one started, when Asa started, I think he was 8 or 9 years old, having come out of that birthday party. If I had known about this when he was, 3 years old, 2 years old, for sure, it would have been started then, for sure.
So in saying that means that you've obviously seen some growth beyond the mat.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
There's no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt about that.
Is there anything else that, like growth outside of the mat that, sticks, or like a story that we haven't brought up or something?
Yeah, I like the idea that I've heard you say a couple times, like failure is not necessarily a bad thing. you got to use those failures. And I have seen that in small ways and in bigger ways with some of my kids. And then just being able to remind them, there's a song lyric right now, rock bottom is a firm foundation, just being able to take that failure and, learn from it and grow from it. Those have been some of the most important moments with my kids. I don't want to get necessarily into their failures, right now, but those have been the things that I've seen that they're willing to step past the failure. They don't necessarily shut down. Now, I have had a couple of them that have shut down. They didn't make it into their black belt when they thought they should. And they made the choice to not continue in the program. I talked them through it and, kind of gave it a little bit of time. But eventually they did come out of the program. Now, that they're also learning from that as well, because that failure is one where they're like, they don't have the opportunity to know what could have come from that had they stayed in it. So all of those things, that I think that is like the most important lesson that all of my kids combined have taken, is that failure is not a bad thing. Being able to go through that and just see, if you stick with something, you can achieve goals.
Well, and I think that I'm biased, but I think that at the studio we do treat failure much different than the outside world, and I think that there's a care that's there. There's a little bit of structure that's there, and then because the care is there, it's not that we're failing them, and I think it's hopefully it's portrayed this way, but that failure doesn't necessarily mean that they are a failure, just that event wasn't the best for them, or it didn't go the way that they had planned, or however they want to think about that. But it wasn't necessarily them, but it was the thing. And so the thing can always be worked on and fixed and adjusted. But I think that because failures happen, that means there's at least a certain standard to reach for. And because the failure is happening and there's a standard to reach for, that means growth is happening. Because I personally think that if you are succeeding across all metrics, all levels, then you're probably stuck. You're isolated. You're in what I would say is the comfort zone. And when you're in the comfort zone, there's not growth that's happening. But just outside of the comfort zone, that's where failure is. And if you have a relationship with failure that is one that can be learned from, and not I am a failure, but I learned from this failure what not to do, if that can be that way, then you can continually grow. Not only yourself, but you can grow that comfort zone and continue to push yourself. And like you said, you want to have that song is the rock bottom hard enough to push off from. And then you use that as a stepping stone to make it to the next and the next and next. And the whole thing is propelling you and pushing you forward, as long as you have that relationship with failure that is one of, I'm not a failure, but I didn't make it at this thing. How can I do this differently next time so that I might succeed, or I might learn something next? So I can try it again and again, and so I can make it through to the next stage.
Oh, absolutely. Just having looked at kids, I was kind of proud of myself when I got to age 18 with the first one. It was kind of a feeling of, I did it, I did it. They're moving on. They're, they're able to, fly out of the nest, and so that was kind of a huge success. But I like to think of 18 as, that's only a small portion of their lives, so if you're thinking about success and, making progress and doing all these things, I think the process of, just going through different stages, you want them to take that into the rest of their life also. You don't want them to stop at 18 and say, hey, I've done it, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm an adult now. No, growth happens for the rest of your life. So not just like, marking down, yes, I earned this, I did this, but kind of going through the process of how to grow and how to use that failure as a growth tool. And as a parent, how to support them through the failure to be able to use it as a growth tool. Those things have been kind of the benefits that I've seen.
Well, and I will say that, and you guys probably, I mean, no, Mr. Bean, I inundated you with Zig Ziglar, and Mrs. Chandler. Maybe you heard me say this, but Zig always said that failure is not an event, or excuse me, failure is not a person; it's an event.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday ended last night, and today's a brand new day.
Right.
And within that, it sounds to me like with some of these, and you've already kind of stated this, so some of these lessons that are being taught at the studio, you're reinforcing those at home, and potentially even using some of the same verbiage that we're using.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, I believe, and you don't have to agree with me, but I believe that when we speak and the children hear us, and then the parents repeat what we're saying to the best of their ability, verbatim to the best of their ability, then the child hears us speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have you had those type of situations? And if so, what was the result?
Yeah. So from your perspective, I see it as when we first started, some of those attributes that I wanted to have as a parent, I saw in you and Master Beane at the studio. So going into it, I was like, this aligns with what I want for my kids. I want these qualities for my kids. And so I felt like from the very beginning, it was kind of like a support system, if you will, for me as a parent to be able to parent. Looking at the idea of respect, not having a discussion on the mat, but yes, sir. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Those kinds of things. Like there are moments with a child where you need a yes, ma'am, or a yes, sir. And, we just need obedience at this moment. And, knowing when those moments happen and they get that. Some of them are still working on it, but, we're using that as a tool and we're learning from those things.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is there's a opportunity to learn from both sides. So I know watching you interact with your kids has been really interesting from my perspective now as a parent to see how to handle some situations. And I one of the things that and I don't know if you remember this or not, but we were, I think three of us were in a meeting with somebody else, and you had talked about not getting into the weeds or too far into the weeds and being able to look at something not, and not nitpicking each other, but to kind of, okay, we don't necessarily need to nitpick, but we can go over whatever the issue is and then move forward from that. That was really interesting to me as a good takeaway and something I've certainly used with my wife and even to an extent with with my kids as a parent. But so learning from you and learning from the other parents I get to see and interact with, my question is, from your perspective, do you think there's things that the school or the instructors misunderstand about families or could perhaps do better to better connect with the families?
Well, I think everybody can all do better. I mean, everybody can do better. I can always do better than I, think. So yes. But with that in mind, I think as a parent and as a studio, and I felt this when I was a teacher. I had students for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And I had to recognize that those kids were not 45-minute kids, but they were 24-hour kids, So there's so many other things and aspects of life that are going into them that if I don't recognize on some level, I'm missing out on that kid. I'm missing out on the potential growth for that kid, and not that I'm responsible for all of their, activities and all their things. And, I don't have time to ask, I didn't have time at that point to ask, 130 students, all about their lives and what they did, the night before and all of that. But just being aware that these kids are people outside of, what's going on in that one moment, I think is important for instructors at the studio. I've seen that from you with different things. There was a time where when my mom passed away, and I was just trying to, hold things together and, for myself emotionally, and then the kids were processing this and I was trying to keep routine, which I think is important for kids to lean into routine. But some of them were struggling. And I think one of them went on the mat, and you and I had a conversation afterwards, and I was like, he just lost his grandmother, and so it was just like understanding some of those things and how people respond. not, maybe they weren't necessarily trying to, act bad or, be disrespectful or whatever, but they were processing things in the background that on the mat, you're not necessarily aware of unless either you're going after it or the parent is sharing.
And I can tell you from that experience, I remember that and have done much better about trying to read them as a person and not under the microscope of who they are in that exact moment. And that's something that I have used not just at the school, but outside as well, to kind of, again, look at them as a person to see, okay, something's different about this person today. They're acting down. And then now I can come alongside them and say, hey, what's going on? How was school today? Or have that conversation with them in the hopes that they will tell me whatever it is. And sometimes they don't. And that's okay. I know that not everybody, is willing to share these things at any given time. And so I give them an opportunity to kind of grow through or move through whatever that is that's going on for them at that given time. And then eventually I know that, eventually either they'll come around or they'll open up and have that conversation. But that was a good learning experience for me. And I've done my best to try to pull that, not just in the school, but outside of the school as well. And then again, to read people, to kind of connect with them on an emotional kind of side, to see that, okay, hey, this person's acting differently or behaving differently, or, they don't have that kind of spark that they normally do. And then I ask them, hey, what's going on? How was school, or whatever that conversation looks like. And again, that has been very, very helpful for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I look at it as what happens on that mat and in the studio is kind of like this little, just a real great analogy for life and the bigger picture. And so a lot of those things, like I mentioned earlier, those things align with what I want my values to be for my kids and what I want them to learn. And got to be honest, sometimes I say the same message like 20 times over. And then, Master Brumitt would say it and it's a brand new idea, and magically they get it, so just having that partnership and that relationship there, one, it aligns with what I want as a parent for my kids. I want them to become independent people who are capable of, going out and doing whatever God has for them, following what he wants them to do. But just knowing that those basics are there, and they didn't just hear it from me. They have, my son has your voice in his head also, and those are important. It's the adage that it takes a village. It does. And I'm just thankful that, you guys have been a part of my village, because my kids are definitely much better for having done that. And the ones that are young right now, it's nice to know that, we're moving them through it. And I know what to expect. I know what they're going to learn. I know the things that are going to come up. I know the struggles that they're going to have, and it's just nice to know that my village is there.
Well, and I think too, maybe often is the time where, you're saying one thing and we didn't even have a conversation, yet somehow, some way, that same thing is brought up, but we never communicated that it needed to be talked about. And I really think it's neat how God allows that to happen. Don't get me wrong. There are times then we've had parents say, hey, I need you to, this is what's going on. And we specifically have a conversation. But then there's other times where it's not the case. And we brought up the exact same subject on the floor that the parent wanted taken care of, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh, yeah. Those moments as a parent, you're like, yes, he heard it from somebody else, that those are wins. Those are wins. Yep.
Well, okay. You've had enough kids go through the program, multiple kids go through the program. I think you have a unique perspective on this. What do you think parents could focus more on? The progress or the process as it relates to the progress at the school?
Yeah, kind of like I mentioned earlier, I do think that it's not progress. I think it's process and long-term, because progress is, kind of just seems linear to some, up, down, up, down, up, down. But even for those that fail and kind of plateau, I've had a couple of kids that they get to a certain level and then they're like, I don't want to do anymore. They still have those lessons and it will go through process wise their entire lives. I think learning happens your entire life. So yes, let's make progress, but more importantly, I think we need to experience the process, and just know how to handle things, how to grow through things, how to use things, because these lessons that are on the mat, they come back, they come around, later in life. And just having experienced them, it's kind of like a vaccine, if you will. Your body, builds up all those things. Oh, I've seen this before. Yes, for the kids, it's the same thing. They've been in situations where maybe they didn't get a stripe for their belt, or maybe they couldn't, balance on their left foot for whatever the count was. All of those little things are the building blocks. So the building process for, lifelong education, and not just, check, I did it, check, I earned my stripe, move on to the next thing.
Well, and what our mind does is it looks into the history of things in order to solve the problem that it's facing right now. So your mind actually goes back and goes, okay, when was this a problem before? What was similar to this, and how did I solve it? And without that process happening, especially in the younger years, your child doesn't have a bank of those situations to pull from. And so therefore it is much more difficult for them to be able to come up with the correct answer. And I don't mean by themselves, but to even sometimes understand what the correct way to do something is moving forward, even when somebody tells, like maybe somebody would give them advice and they would think it was good advice, but because they've not had that bank, they can't even filter that advice to a degree that they could really come up with their own decision. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that does. I just looking at kids are going to make bad choices. It's a learning process. Kids are going to do things you don't want them to do. Kids are, all of these things. And then, just looking at them as, this is life is a learning process, giving them the opportunity to fail. You give them the opportunity to fail on the mat, not necessarily that we want them to fail on the mat. But when they do fail on the mat, these are the things. Hey, you're constantly talking to them about, hey, use this failure to do better next time. Or because you've been through this, you have kind of a heads up, or kind of a leg up on the other people doing it for the first time. Just grounding that perspective, like you said, being able to filter things through your past experiences. It's very, very important.
And that's why those past experiences are so important. And when parents don't allow their kids to have those experiences, they don't have the bank to pull from.
Right.
And again, I go back to the fact that they think that they're doing them a service, but they're actually doing them a disservice, because they can't have your perspective. Only you can have your perspective. They need to come up with their own bank so that they have their own perspective to pull from.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So very true.
Well, I think the other part to that is we know that the kids, their brain is so much different before the age of 10, let's say. And because it's so much different, they're using that pre-10 age gap to learn and grow and get all of those things that get stuck in their head and will inevitably become who they are as they become older. And all of that gets, lives in the subconscious. They're not even aware of that. And as they move through to adulthood, as they move past and become who they're going to be, really a lot of that was shaped before they were 10 years old. And you talked about having the kids start when they were real young. The benefit to that is then we get to kind of shape and help them to grow into those things, so that when they become an adult, that back catalog, all of those things are already there. And they're there in a structured and carefully thought through way, so they can become the best version of themselves. At least that's the intent.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in a perfect world, every single one of my children would have, gotten their second degree, gotten their third degree, and gone on. I think also as a parent, you need to be able to allow them I've had some that have, gone on and, gone through age 18 and gotten whatever. And then I have some that, at age 13, 14, they're done, and letting them live with that decision, letting them long term, have the consequences of that decision. I don't know all the consequences or what those are going to be. But I do think that it would be better had they stayed in the program. But as a parent, allowing them, you kind of have to feel that out, not giving in right away, but, feeling it out. I got to a point with one of my kids where I felt as a parent, it was better for me to take him out than to keep bringing him every week, because I didn't want him to kind of sour the rest of the class, with his attitude and his, lack of trying, so just feeling those things out, giving that, but then allowing the kid to fail. Not that I want him to, but allowing that to happen, because he's still processing that. He's still going to learn from that moment, even though he is not on the mat anymore. He sees his brothers, he sees his sisters, he sees where things, could have gone for him in different ways. But, not taking those things personally, not taking kids' failures personally, being able to step back, from the very beginning with that story of my kid, getting, hit in the face and all of this, being able to separate myself from that, and growing as a parent for that. That is so important. Allow the failures, allow the things to happen. Definitely be there for your kid, make sure they're safe, but, letting them and having a trusted support group in which they can make these failures is important as a parent.
So if you had some advice for parents that were unsure whether martial arts is worth it, and then obviously, of course, selfishly, TriStar Martial Arts is worth it. What would your message be to them?
Oh yeah, well, so I have some kids that do sports. Okay, they do sports. They've run, they've done swimming, they've done all sorts of different things. And at first, when we were looking at sports for the kids, my thoughts were, well, I don't necessarily want them to be, football players. I'd rather them choose a lifelong sport that they can do. I don't see many 80-year-olds playing football, but, I do see 80-year-olds in the pool swimming kind of thing. So that was my mindset. Let's give them something that's more long-term. But then when we added, and we've already talked about these things, added the additional pieces of TriStar especially, but adding these different pieces of TriStar with the alignment with what my values are, what I want my kid to hear from me, but also from other people that, kind of support each other. Those are the lifelong pieces. Those are the pieces that make it worth it. Those are the things and the lessons that, kids need, kids grow from, that make it worth it.
So would you say then, and I'm putting words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm wrong, would you say that it was an investment or a cost?
Investment in the kid. Yeah. Just like buying milk, for your kids, you do these things. These are things that you do as a parent. Kids are expensive, but kids, you just make the choices that are going to get them long-term life longevity with lessons and with skill. I got to be honest with you, my oldest kids, I'm not afraid of them going out and, going out to Chicago with their friends or, going and doing things. One, because I know that they have kind of like a self-awareness about them, but I also know that they could take someone out if they really needed to, you know what I mean? So just those long-term life skills, that there are so many benefits to it that it's definitely worth it.
Well, Allison, I want to say thank you. Thank you for, entrusting us with your kids to help to teach and lead them through all of the ups and downs that we've been able to do that with. And do you have any key thoughts or maybe final takeaways for to the listeners that would be helpful for them?
One, give your kids over to God from the very beginning. That's the first one. Give them to God from the very beginning. And then be ready to, as a parent, realizing that you're growing with them. I said earlier, I'm not the same parent I was with my firstborn as I am with my 10th child, and we kind of say that she's getting the best mom, because I've had all the practice, but just allow those things to, people to pour into your kids. Choose wisely with who you let, pour into your kids. Make good decisions that way. Give them good structure, and then let them go. Let them go. Let them experience those things. Let them experience failures. Don't hold the leash so tight, because you do want them to come back and talk to you when they're older. You do want them to come and seek your opinion and seek your voice again when they don't hear it so loudly when they're in their 20s as they did when they were in their teens, So be willing to let them go. Structure, and then let them go.
Well, you're not wrong, because I'll tell you that I can remember as soon as I got into my 20s and I moved out, and then all of a sudden I thought my mom was smart.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know what? That's been kind of like, that's been a nice thing the past couple of years, especially for my daughter. And I'm going to say these things, and she's probably going to kick me when I see her next. But she has come back to me at times and said, "Oh, Mom, I know exactly why you did such and such," or I know exactly why. And then she'll see other people or other things, and she's like, "Mom," And so, those things, I treasure those things a little bit, because it's the full circle. You've gone through it, you've done it. And those are kind of those little moments are the rewards that just pop up. You're not necessarily looking for them, but those are the little things that are, kind of little cherry on top that I think are kind of moments from God that say, follow the path, do what you're supposed to be doing, trust me, let the kid grow. And then you get those little rewards, those little gems from time to time.
Well, I do have, I didn't tell you we were going to do this, but I got a few lightning round questions for you if you're willing to answer them.
Oh, sure. Oh, okay.
Okay. So, and if you want to say pass, you can say pass. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So one word that you would use to describe TriStar.
TriStar. This is supposed to be lightning, and there's so many that are coming to mind. Let's say, I would just say compassionate.
Okay.
We've had that a lot lately, just compassionate.
All right. What about the biggest parenting lesson you've learned?
From TriStar?
Mm-hmm.
We nailed it. It was that story from the very beginning. Let your kids get punched. I mean, that's horrible. It sounds awful, but
in context, it doesn't.
Right. For sure. Exactly. But let them take the punches. Let them be their own block for some of the punches that come.
What about the most underrated benefit of the martial arts?
The focus on the fact that this is lifelong. This is lifelong learning. These are skills that you will have for the rest of your life. When you get into the leadership program, all of those things that you've curated together, all of those lessons, all of those essays that you take them through, and those self-thinkings, and all of that time that they have to spend on themselves, it's worth it, because if they don't go through it now, for sure they're going to be going through it in their 30s and 40s when they have to go back and figure out what happened, and get themselves out of different things. If they can come up with a plan and think about life now, they can have a better plan for the future than having to go back and kind of make amends for things or whatever.
So one last one.
Yeah.
What is the let's say the best keep going tip that you can give to busy families?
The best keep going tip: keep your uniform in a bag. Know where your belt is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of basic, but just know one, that it's worth it. You have to believe in something to keep going, and just know that other people have seen it. Other people have been through the process. Other people have seen, the results and the things, the good things for life, for their kids, that they'll be able to take longer. Just hold on to that in those moments when you don't want to go to karate that night because whatever reason. Just know these are little things that you're building blocks for lifelong living.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I with regards to that, I'm thinking like really the day that you don't want to go is the day that's the most important day you need to go.
It absolutely is. And
Yeah.
not only for the kid, because it teaches the kid something, but when they see mom go through that, no, and within reason. I mean, there have been times where we've taken off moments from karate because, life happens, I had baby in the NICU and, all of these different things that come up. But knowing that just because, just because you didn't get your homework done and you need to spend time doing homework because you didn't plan for all the things prior to that very well, stick to your commitments and don't let that kind of that cascade of, negative things start to happen to you. Because the moment you get out of that momentum, you got to keep the momentum going. You've got to keep those things on pace. The kids see that, but then also it's helpful as a parent to have that little kid as a kind of a mirror and a reminder that, yep, we need to keep going. We need to do that for myself also, not just the kid.
Well, it sounds to me like you're describing about playing the long game in totality. In every aspect of this, you're playing the long game.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't, I'm older now than I was 10, 15 years ago, whatever, obviously. But as a new parent, I don't know that I considered life in the fact that it was longer than that moment, busy with dinner, busy with diapers, busy with the moment. I don't know that I took the time to see it long term. And I just tell you now, every day is what's long term right now, because it's so rewarding when you get to that place and you allow yourself to get to that place where you can see things for a bigger picture. Just know that it's out there. Know that it's out there. Strive for looking at the bigger picture.
Well, we appreciate you, being willing to come on and share your wisdom. I will tell everybody, we leaned on you heavily during COVID when everybody had to switch over to, doing Zoom training and all the parents had to now start teaching their kids at home and helping them at home. I don't know if you remember this, but we actually this isn't your first interview with us. I actually did an interview with you back during COVID. You remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't think I'm any more, better spoken than I was then. That's like my biggest thing. I am not a good public speaker.
No, you did wonderful.
But I do remember that. And I do remember during COVID when you had my kids come in and do the little videos for them that, with them to put online, and just being a parent and having to go through COVID and all that. Those are good memories from COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, but we appreciate you doing that as well, because, we really leaned on you because we had, obviously, the majority of our school are not homeschool parents. And so they needed some framework and understanding on how to actually do that and not go crazy while doing that and understanding how to do that. Because, we had you on, we had one of my friends who's a child psychologist on, just because we wanted to help our village, if you will, understand how to navigate these things. So again, thank you for being a part of this. Mr. Beane, anything else you want to say before we let her go?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the time that you've been at the studio, for the conversations that we've had, for the opportunity again to have
your friendship,
the friendship and the opportunity again to have that impact over the kids that you've brought there. And yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, I just want to remind the listeners, hey, share, especially this episode, with other parents, even if they're not at TriStar. There's a lot of good parenting advice. Any final things that we need to clean up, Mr. Beane, before we end?
Well, okay, so next week, and we've teased this actually a couple weeks ago, but next week it's going to happen. We're going to do some creative uses for AI at home. And I think that's going to be really special and different from what other people are going to be thinking about AI for. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.